Gary Cohn, who is, of course, Donald Trump's economic advisor and also the National Economic Council director, is now making his rounds in the media supporting tax cuts. He claims tax cuts for the middle class, but if you read the proposal as it is so far, it's tax cuts for pretty much everyone except for the lowest earners in America, who at the moment pay 10% in taxes, but would end up paying 12% in taxes should this proposal get passed by Congress. Now, Gary Cohn is an interesting fellow. Used to be the president of Goldman Sachs. He is the epitome of the swamp, okay? He still has swamp slime all over his body as he's doing these press interviews. So let's listen to him talk to Stephanopoulos about, what's Stephanopoulos' first name again?
George.
Yorga. Yeah,
good Greek
right.
man.
Yes.
He has an evil eye always attached to his face.
So let's take a look at Gary Cohn and his explanation of these tax cuts to George Stephanopoulos.
Can you tell middle-class families watching right now, say a family of four earning $55,000, how much they will save under the president's plan?
Look, our tax plan is purely aimed at middle-class families. A typical family of four earning $55,000 in America today is going to have a substantial tax decrease.
Here in the state of New York, the top tax official here in the city of New York says that nearly half of the middle-class families earning between $50,000 and $75,000 are actually going to get a tax increase here in New York City because you eliminate the deduction of state and local taxes.
Well, George, if you look at the reality of the country as a whole, less than 25% of the families in America itemize. So we're solving for the country as a whole. So only the people that itemize today, which are less than 25% of the families in America today, itemize. So they're the only ones that are actually taking the deduction for their state and local taxes. We're solving for the greater good of the country. But what you have to look at is you have to look at what we did in its entirety. You have to look at this plan in its entirety.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, you can't guarantee that no middle-class family will get a tax increase. There will be middle-class families who get a tax increase under your plan, correct?
George, there's an exception to every rule.
So that's a yes.
So look, I can't guarantee anything. You can always find a unique family somewhere.
Okay, so as I mentioned on yesterday's show when we initially covered this tax proposal, there are so many details that still need to be sussed out. So that includes what they plan on doing with corporate tax loopholes. Which corporate tax loopholes are they going to do away with? But in regard to middle-class families and the question of whether or not some middle-class families would end up paying more in taxes, there is a huge possibility that that will happen. So just to give you the numbers, when it comes to the total percentage of Americans who do deduct state and local taxes, it's about 30% of Americans, 29.3% to be absolutely specific. That's according to the Tax Policy Center. Now, that includes rich people and middle class families as well, to be fair. But you also have to keep in mind that the states that tend to have higher state taxes are usually blue states, right? So California is at the top of that list. Oregon is also at the top of that list. And so these are individuals who do deduct, when they file for their taxes because it does make a difference. And so if they get rid of that, okay, you want to get rid of that deduction. What are you going to do when it comes to these corporations? Because you haven't been specific about that. You haven't been specific about what you would do to the the richest people and how they take advantage of these loopholes. Now, another thing that I wanted to quickly mention is that, Cohn claims, no, it's not a tax cut for the wealthy, except it is. And I'll tell you why. So let's go to graphic 8. The Trump plan would lower the top tax rate from 39.6% to 35%, though it also leaves open the possibility of a higher rate for the super wealthy. The possibility. So let me get this straight. Oh, we're gonna leave it up to Congress, which is as corrupt as it could possibly be with the legalized bribery we have in the country. We're gonna leave it up to them, and they could possibly add one more bracket for the highest income earners in the country. No, that's not gonna happen. I'm not even being pessimistic, I'm being realistic.
The
we all know
Republican
what the truth
Congress
is.
won't try and won't go for this extra super high tax rate that'll affect most of them and their families, no.
And the estate tax?
The estate tax. Okay.
That actually is spelled out, that they're planning to eliminate the estate tax. Shocker.
Yeah. So they want to do away with the estate tax. And who would that benefit? Would it possibly benefit Donald Trump and his family? Yeah, I think so. So let's go to the next video where Cohn addresses that a little bit.
The president has also said that wealthy will not get a tax cut under the plan. He says that he himself will not get a tax cut under the plan, or his family won't get one. He said that you won't get one as well. But look at the front page of USA Today right now. It says that Trump could reap millions from his own tax plan.
You've got to look at the plan in its entirety.
I am looking at the whole.
Remember, we also put the ability for Congress to put a fourth tax rate in place, a fourth tax rate on wealthy Americans, very high earners. If we need to take more money from high earners and transfer it to middle-class Americans to make sure that middle-class Americans are getting a tax cut, we've given Congress the ability to do that.
He says, believe me, I won't be getting a tax cut. Can you guarantee that President Trump won't get a tax cut under this plan?
George, when we've looked at the tax plan and we look what it does for Americans, we are very confident that Americans are getting a great deal here. We have also said that wealthy Americans are not getting a tax cut.
Will the wealthy get a tax cut or not?
The wealthy are not getting a tax cut under our plan.
That's not the evidence that's out there so far, but of course there are a lot of details yet to come, as you have pointed out.
Oh, look at George.
Yeah, the way that I read several things about how this can work, because the way that they point out they want to have regular Americans put their taxes on a postcard and do both sides and turn it in. They've been talking about that for
just like that.
Over a decade, right? And probably even longer than I was even ever paying attention to anything. So the way they want to do is that way, but that doesn't eliminate people with all kinds of means and tax attorneys from making it still pages full of a tax return document that allows you to get around all of these tax plans that you have that you guarantee isn't going to allow rich people to go around it, but it will. So directly for Donald Trump, the one particular one that stood out, I'm not going to go through all of them, but one that stood out was the preferential income tax rate for pass-through corporations, which there are 500 underneath the Trump brand. So it allows people that have parts and hands into this corporation to say, well, it's like a personal income for me, so it's not really a business, these small business owners. It's not my business, but it's actually my personal income. Then I can take it at 25% rather than the 39.6 that it would be at. And so it allows them to do whatever they want to move money around. Now, if you're that 4-person family that makes $50,000 a year, which is not middle class, but
which is poverty. Let's be very clear. That's poverty.
Yeah, I mean, think about you're talking about kids. Say you have 2 kids and you have school and preschool and then maybe just normal expenses like that. It's gone. This is $50,000 to $55,000. I mean, well, just gross without being taxed every day.
Yeah.
Because you don't go to the grocery store and they say, hey, so I see you got this much taken out of your taxes every month. The cost of this bread is going to be cheaper. Anyway, I got sidetracked. So they'll end up paying that much less to go around it. They can pay for these tax attorneys to do all this stuff. You have no recourse to do it if you're just a regular person. It makes this little to nothing every year.
H&R Block ain't gonna do it for you.
Right.
It's not.
Look, based on the proposal, and they're very specific when it comes to the cuts. Like that's the one thing that they are specific on. So they do plan on, as you mentioned, Nomiki, getting rid of the estate tax. That is a tax cut. They have limited the number of tax brackets in their proposal where there's only 3. And so what do you think happens to the highest earners? Their taxes come down. It's flat out what's going on. It's right in front of us, right? And he has the audacity to go on television and pretend as though, no, me and my cronies don't stand to earn anything from this or gain anything from this, please.
Because let's keep it real. You know what it is? It's a pain in the ass to look through all this and look at the details of how it all works. And then so the people that do, the researchers or these detached corporations, or not corporations, or investigators on this, and in this case, George Stephanopoulos, who is probably telling the story of what he's been told already, how these things work. And then after they say it, they go, oh, that's so complicated. People at home can sit and listen and go, that sounds like that's a pretty bad plan. But then the response, all it has to be is, they're lying to you, fake news. Believe me instead.
And that goes back to 1991, right before the 92 elections. Read my lips, no new taxes. That was thrown into the face of George Bush. arguably cost him the election to Bill Clinton, who's all about the economy stupid. So as we come into 2020, if this tax plan is not, played out as fake news, which I don't actually think is going to affect the majority of Republican voters, I think that is why the Democrats need to have a clear spokesperson, a clear leader who has an alternative economic message that keeps it about the 1% and the tax havens and all the stuff that they're doing to manipulate the system so that the middle class, which barely exists now, is bearing the burden.
Right. My concern is that Democrats, for the most part, with the exception of people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, will play ball because, and here's another thing to keep in mind, guys. It's Democrats in office are not poor, right? Like they're making some pretty good money, and so they also stand to benefit from tax cuts. Also, people who host these cable news shows get criticism for their incredibly superficial coverage of stories like this. But you think that's an accident? I mean, they have multi-million-dollar contracts. They love it. Yes. They love it, which is why I give George Stephanopoulos some credit for going after Cohn the way he did in that interview, because you don't see that type of follow-up in any other interview. You just don't in mainstream media. So these are all things to keep in mind. I think what's important is for Americans to pay attention to what hasn't been specified so far, and keep in mind that it hasn't been specified for a reason. Right. Why is it that they haven't detailed to a great extent the type of corporate tax loopholes they plan on doing away with? Remember, when it comes to corporations, they want to lower the tax rate from 35% to 20%, which, by the way, right now the effective tax rate is 18.7%. And so, all right, you want to increase the effective tax rate to 20% and do away with the loopholes? Maybe I'm having a conversation, but that is not what they're doing. At least that's not how it appears at the moment.
So what I'm predicting is that Donald Trump's way of selling this, because there will be a lot of pressure on him about this issue, about draining the swamp and making it so that the 1% gets a fair share tax. He's going to talk about bringing jobs back. If you want to bring jobs back, if you want those corporations to not use those tax havens and go overseas, which actually isn't as many as we think, then we've got to make sure that they have an incentive. And that is the scheme. That is the Republican scheme there. And we have to pay attention to that, because number one, it's not as many corporations as we think.
Well, yes, and also Cohn was asked about that today, and interestingly enough, he said something about, because a reporter challenged him in a way that I think was brilliant. Oftentimes these tax cuts are used by these corporate executives to buy stock, to increase their stock value, to do acquisitions. They consolidate, which means that they'll merge with another company and then lay a bunch of people off. So it's actually counterproductive. People lose jobs as a result of these tax cuts. And his response was, no, but then they'll reinvest it into the stock markets and they'll help small businesses. Some BS answer, but that is not what happens. They don't look to stimulate the economy. They look to stimulate themselves and their own corporation.
It's amazing. There was also one last piece of this that I remember reading. Their lobbyists, or these large corporations, will give tens of millions of dollars, we already know this, to politicians to do their bidding already. So then, which one is it? Is it that they're so broke that they can't afford any of these taxes that they keep getting chopped down with? Or is it they can spend $52 million to lobby politicians to do their bidding? If they had that money just throw away to bring back, I think they might have it to actually reinvest into America and bring it. So by the way, also they're still also arguing to not give anyone a raise. So this minimum wage fights, which one is it? Like, you keep telling us these fairy tales, but then as soon as the actual policies are up for debate, they go, oh, who needs minimum wage increases from $6 an hour? Calm down. Yep. I thought you're hiring people. Where's the evidence?
TYT membership gets you commercial-free Young Turks. Download it, stream it, podcast it. Get all the network shows and support independent media. TYTnetwork.com/join.